The Göhrde State Forest in Lower Saxony, Germany, was a beautiful and peaceful place. Tall trees, sunlight peeking through the leaves, a perfect spot for a relaxing day. But this peaceful forest held a terrible secret. Starting in the 1980s, scary things began to happen. People disappeared, and the forest became a place of fear. A young couple, Ursula and Peter Reinhold, were the first to vanish in 1989. Their car was found near the forest, but they were gone. Weeks turned into months and no one could find them. This was just the beginning of a nightmare. Over the next 10 years, more bodies were found buried in the forest. Most of the victims were couples who had come to the forest for a romantic getaway. Their deaths were violent and terrifying. Fear spread through Germany as more and more people disappeared. The peaceful forest became a scary place, haunted by an unknown killer. No one knew why the killer was doing this. There didn't seem to be any connection between the victims. Rumors spread, but no one knew who the killer was. The forest kept its secrets, and the families of the victims were left with their grief and unanswered questions. The once beautiful Göhrde State Forest became a symbol of the terrible things that can happen, even in the most peaceful places. Finding the killer in the Göhrde Forest was very difficult for the police. The forest was huge, with thick bushes and winding paths. It was the perfect hiding place. There wasn't much evidence, and what they did find didn't help much. The killer was very careful and didn't leave any clues. Even though the police worked hard, the case remained unsolved for years. Every time a new body was found, the pressure on the police grew. People wanted answers and they wanted justice for the victims. But the killer seemed to disappear into thin air after each murder. The police couldn't find any pattern in the victims. They were different ages, had different jobs, and came from different backgrounds. This made everyone feel uneasy. Anyone could be the next victim. People stopped going to the forest. It was no longer a place to relax, but a place of fear and suspicion. During the investigation, one name came up: Kurt-Werner Wichmann. He lived near the forest and was often seen there. He had a history of small crimes and was known to be a loner, but the police didn't have enough evidence to connect him to the murders. The investigation continued, but Wichmann's name, like many others, faded away. The mystery of the Göhrde killer remained unsolved. Kurt-Werner Wichmann was a mystery to everyone. He seemed like a normal guy. He worked as a carpenter and lived in a simple house near Lüneburg Heath. His neighbors said he was quiet and kept to himself. He didn't stand out. But Wichmann had a dark secret. He had a history of hurting people, especially women. He had been in jail for assault and rape. People who knew him said he had a bad temper and could be cruel. His past showed he was capable of bad things, but no one imagined how terrible. In 1993, Wichmann killed himself while in police custody. He had been arrested for stealing a car, a small crime compared to the awful things he would later be connected to. Some people thought his suicide meant he was guilty of the murders. He seemed to be running from the police, even for a small crime. But without real proof, his involvement in the Göhrde murders was just a theory. Wichmann's death left a lot of unanswered questions. Did he take the secrets of the Göhrde murders to his grave? Or were there other secrets, other victims waiting to be discovered? His death closed one chapter but opened the door to even more disturbing possibilities. The mystery of Kurt-Werner Wichmann continued to haunt the investigation even after his death. The Göhrde murders were a terrible reminder of the evil that can hide in plain sight. Years passed, and the case went cold. The files sat in the Lüneburg Police Department collecting dust. Hope for justice faded, but new technology offered a chance to find the truth. In 2017, the police looked at the evidence again, using new DNA technology. They tested a hair found in the hand of one of the victims. The results were shocking. The DNA matched Kurt-Werner Wichmann. Even though he had been dead for many years, science finally revealed him as the killer. The news brought a mix of relief and sadness to the families of the victims. They finally had an answer after all these years. The monster of the Göhrde forest finally had a name and a face. The DNA evidence proved Wichmann was the killer. It was like a silent witness that had held the key to the case all along. It showed how important science is in solving crimes, even very old ones. The ghost of Kurt-Werner Wichmann had finally been unmasked.